I want to share with you a system that is very illuminating for understanding ourselves and also understanding all of life, which is the system or the concept that we have three centers of intelligence or three brains: the head center, which is the thinking center, the heart center, the feeling center, and the gut, which is the instinctive center. And the tricky thing about explaining them is that while they are distinct and kind of separate, they're also all interrelated and they make up one whole. But in order to really understand it, we need to talk about them as if they're distinct and separate from each other. So in this video, I'm going to take you through each of the centers, and at the end of the video, I'm going to talk about how they're all connected to each other and affecting each other all the time. So let's dive in. The head center here is also called the thinking center. It's the mental dimension of our being. So we could also say just the mind. And at the level of the head center of the mind, we perceive life in terms of concepts and ideas, whereas the heart center and the gut center do not perceive in terms of concepts and ideas. The head center is also the center that has to do with awareness, and that's in more than one way. First of all, it has to do with awareness, and that concepts have to do with awareness. When we exchange concepts, particularly useful concepts that help us see something, not just any old concept, but when we're exchanging concepts, they point to something that if we understand what the concept is saying, then all of a sudden we see that new thing. So the concept pointed us to something, we saw it, and now we have this new awareness. So the exchange of concepts and the raising of our awareness are very much interlinked. An example of exchanging concepts in a way that raises awareness is just what's happening in this video. I'm sharing with you a concept, I'm sharing with you an idea which you may have heard before, or you may not, or you may have heard it before but not quite in the way that I'm explaining it. And in either case, when I'm sharing these ideas with you, it's pointing to something, a particular way of seeing, that if you kind of align with the concept and are able to see it that way, then it brings you this new awareness. So an example of that is happening right now. When we're bringing awareness to something in that way, it's a way of bringing light to something, like it's not in the dark anymore, it's in the light. So the head center has a lot to do with illumination, clarity, seeing things clearly, and that feeling of clarity in our mind. And it also has to do with the opposite states of those, which is confusion and unclarity. Those are also mental states. But the head center also has to do with awareness in another way than the exchange of concepts and seeing things through concepts, which is the kind of awareness that's practiced in mindfulness and meditation. It's being aware of things without thinking about them. And so that might be the opposite of what we expect the head center to be about, because the head center is so much about thoughts and concepts and ideas and the exchange of thoughts and concepts and ideas. But sort of a higher capacity of the head center is the capacity to be aware of something without thinking about it. In other words, to just observe it in a pure kind of way without judging it. That's also a capacity of the head center. So everything that has to do with thinking, with information, with pattern recognition, with knowing versus not knowing, awareness versus ignorance, clarity versus confusion. All of that has to do with the head center. The next center, the heart center, is also called the feeling center. And whereas the mind was about thoughts and the mental dimension, this center is about feelings, and it's the emotional dimension of our being. This is the center that when we're in love with something or we're in love with someone, we feel it expand and open up. And to the opposite, when we contract into fear, we also feel this center contracting and closing. This is also the center that when we're really missing someone, it feels achy. When we get triggered, or when emotional traumas or emotional wounds from the past get reopened or reactivated, this is the center that they're triggered in, and it can feel very vulnerable and raw. This is the center that if we go through a breakup, we feel that feeling of brokenness right in the middle of our chest, right exactly where the heart center is. The heart center, as you might guess, has a tremendous amount to do with connection. It's the connection between you and me. It's the connection between us and our lover, the connection between us and whatever it is that we love. I live in Colorado, and I moved here because I love the mountains. When I look at the mountains, I feel this joy in my heart because it's what my heart loves. And so this center is about the desire to be near to or close to what we love, to be intimate with what we love. Our hearts want intimacy and connection with what they love, whether that's a person or something or an environment or the feeling of happiness itself. Our heart wants to be near to that. And when we think of the heart, we might kind of look out at the world and think something like, gee, it would be good if the world had more heart, more kindness, more compassion, more love, and if we all treated each other with more love. And there's a lot of truth in that. But in a way, all of us human beings, we can't help but be motivated by our heart, motivated by our emotions, and that we're all wanting to feel better, to feel good, as opposed to feeling bad. And a lot of human activity can be boiled down to just that, to wanting to feel good and doing things to try to feel better. So we all want to feel good or feel better, but the approach that we take to feeling good, whether that's an intelligent, informed, conscious approach or the opposite of that, depends on the mind. It depends on what we're aware of at the level of the head center. And so that goes back to the interconnection between the centers, that what we're doing to feel good at a heart level is informed by what we're aware of and what we know at the level of the mind. And so I'll speak more to the interconnection towards the end of the video. The gut center or the belly center is also called the instinctive center because we have instincts. We're partly animals, and its focal point is in the belly. But just as thoughts aren't really confined to the head and feelings aren't really confined to the heart in this area, the gut center really encompasses the whole physical body. So it's also the level of physicality and matter. as opposed to thinking, which has to do with the head center, or feeling, which has to do with the heart center. The gut level is the level of doing and action, in the sense of what actions do we take to move things forward. It's very practical. And those actions are always in the physical world. Whereas the head center has to do with awareness versus ignorance, and the heart center has to do with love versus fear. The gut center has to do with empowerment versus disempowerment, and responsibility versus victimization. So if you take the thought, I can, as in I can do it, and just hold that thought in your mind right now while you're watching this video, and feel what it feels like in your body to think, I can do it. And if you're feeling that, you might get the sense, or kind of get the feel for the cells of your body almost coming alive, like it's an enlivening feeling, and you're feeling your capability, your strength, your power. This is what the gut center is about. It's not, when we're feeling this kind of empowerment, this quality of I can, we're not up in our heads, cut off, and it's not kind of the soft, tender quality of the heart either. It's a quality of fire, of feeling our power. And so you probably know some people in your life, I'm sure you do, who they kind of orient to life more through their gut than through their heart or through their head. And they're often people who get a lot of things done. They keep moving forward. They take on a lot of projects. Maybe they're even running a business, and you start in kind of seeing them do that and feeling that. You get the feel for the gut as this kind of driving force in our being, and this source of power, almost like the engine of a car. And it can be nice to be around those people who have a lot of that, because when we're around them, we kind of intuitively, energetically feel their power and their strength. And it's nice to be around when we notice that quality, because it feels solid and stable and like you can count on them. It feels like a kind of reassuring presence. That's our strength. So the gut center has a lot to do with empowerment, but if you feel it energetically in kind of a meditative way of putting your attention there, you can also feel this quality. It's not just empowerment. There's if you put your attention down in the belly, there's kind of a solidity to it, and a stability to it. It can really feel like an anchor point for your attention and for your energy. As you're putting your attention there, you get the feel of like a oomph, feeling like gravity, or like an anchor just resting on the bottom of the ocean. So it's not just power, it's also, this is where our roots are, and this is where we ground ourselves and where we feel grounded. And the last thing I want to say about the gut center for now is that it also has to do with manifestation, in the sense that what we end up doing in our life and bring into this world starts out in the mind as a thought or a vision, something we see, an idea. And then in our heart, that evokes this inspiration and this passion. But the way it actually gets translated into this world is through taking action on it, and actually going through the steps that we need to bring that into something tangible, that has a form. So the gut is kind of the last step in the chain of manifestation. So now let's get into how the three centers are interrelated. And I think a good way into this is to think about starting with the head center. When we have a positive perspective about something, that's just a perspective, but it's actually felt in the heart, right? So, and the opposite of that is when we have a negative perspective about something in the mind, we feel that emotionally. So we see how the perspectives that we hold at the level of the mind are literally creating the feelings that we're feeling in our heart, in our emotional body. What we hold in mind is also being reflected at the gut level, in the sense of it's giving what we do and our actions. So, we don't do things that we know won't work beforehand. We know at the level of the mind it won't work, so we don't do it. If we, for example, we tried to cut a steak with a fork, and we found that it didn't work, then we know that, and so we just don't do that anymore at the level of the gut. But a little more complex example would be, let's say you see a bunch of different possibilities in your mind of different things you can do in life, different ways you can go. How do you pick which way to go? In our heart gives us another kind of information, which is which of those possibilities is really inspiring you, which of those possibilities really evokes your passion. We don't just act on any old possibility. We tend to be drawn to those possibilities that we see. First we see it, but we tend to be drawn to the ones that really evoke something from us at the heart level. And then we act on that. So in that case, it's a combination of seeing it in the mind and then feeling our response to it in the heart and acting on that. So both the mind and the heart are influencing what we end up doing. So the more you contemplate these three centers and the way that they're interrelated, the more that you realize that we need to develop all three of them. If we're going through life so much in our heads, we're cut off from our feelings and also cut off from our power. On the other hand, if we're too much in our emotions, then we don't really feel the stability of what it's like to have a foundation in our gut, and also the way that when we have our head center operating well, it has this cool, clear awareness that kind of helps balance our emotional life and brings this quality of equanimity to it. If we're really oriented from the gut, then we might fall into a pattern of overworking, of sort of being overly zealous, and at the same time bulldozing over our emotions, bulldozing over the parts of us that are hurt at the heart level, and actually not being as effective in getting what we want out of our work and all this stuff we're doing, because we don't take the time to stop, pause, step back into the head center and look at things from different perspectives, which gives us an objectivity and makes our work much more efficient, especially in the long run. So ideally, all three centers balance each other out. The awareness and the insight that the mind has is balanced by being emotionally sensitive, especially to other people, but also with ourselves and the heart. And that awareness and insight is translated into what we actually do and how we live at the gut level. And at the heart, the emotional sensitivity that we have and the love is guided by the intelligence of the mind and supported with that strong foundation in the gut. And finally, that path of action that we're carving at the gut level is also guided and directed and informed by the perspectives of the mind. And it's done for the sake of what our hearts really care about, what we love. Ideally, the relationship between the three centers is symbolized by the equilateral triangle, like this, where each side is of equal length, and so they're all playing equal roles and supporting each other equally. But that's the ideal. That's not how life is. Each of us has a bias towards one center more than the other centers, and usually we're compensating for our lack of development in one or two of the centers by leaning more into the center that we're strong in. So with that said, I'd leave you with a few questions so that you can explore this subject matter more for yourself and your own experience. First question is, what's your strong point in terms of these three centers? Which one are you strongest in? What's your weak point? And knowing that, what's your path towards balance?